Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. Today we have several issues on the agenda, including the issue of migration policy. But I would like to begin with another matter, one of exceptional importance and fundamental significance for the protection of our national interests, Russia's sovereignty, and for ensuring international security as a whole, without any exaggeration. I am referring to the situation in the sphere of strategic stability. Unfortunately, it continues to degrade, caused by the cumulative effect of a number of negative factors, which provoke the escalation of existing risks and the emergence of new ones of a strategic nature. As a result of the West's earlier, quite destructive steps, the foundation for constructive relations and practical cooperation between nuclear-armed states has been severely undermined. The basis for dialogue in corresponding bilateral and multilateral formats has been shaken. Step by step, the system of Soviet-American and Russian-American agreements on the control of missile, nuclear, and strategic defensive arms has been practically dismantled. This was a system that worked both to stabilize relations between the states possessing the two largest nuclear arsenals, and more broadly, to strengthen global security as a whole. I repeat once again, we have spoken many times about the reasons for this state of affairs and its possible consequences. The multiple problems that have accumulated in the strategic sphere since the beginning of the 21st century are linked to the West's destructive actions, its destabilizing doctrinal concepts, and military technical programs aimed at undermining global parity and at acquiring, or attempting to acquire, absolute, overwhelming superiority. We have consistently and in detail addressed these issues, criticized this position, and not only highlighted the extreme danger of the situation's further degradation, but also repeatedly put forward specific ideas for its joint correction. However, our warnings and initiatives received no meaningful response. I emphasize, and there should be no doubt about this, Russia is capable of responding to any existing and newly arising threats, responding not in words but through the application of military technical measures. An example of this was our decision to abandon the unilateral moratorium on the deployment of ground-based, intermediate, and shorter-range missiles. This was a forced step, dictated by the need to respond adequately to programs involving the deployment in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region of similar weapons of American and other Western production, which pose a direct threat to Russia's security. Our plans to strengthen the country's defense capability are built taking into account the changing global environment and are being implemented fully and on time. We are confident in the reliability and effectiveness of our national deterrence forces. At the same time, however, we are not interested in further escalating tensions or fueling an arms race. Russia has always proceeded and continues to proceed from the preference and priority of political diplomatic methods of maintaining international peace on the basis of principles of equality, indivisible security, and mutual consideration of interests. I remind you that the last significant political diplomatic achievement in the field of strategic stability was the signing in 2010 of the Russian-American Treaty on Strategic Offensive Arms. However, later, due to the extremely hostile policy of the Biden administration, which violated the basic premises on which the treaty was founded, its full-scale implementation was suspended in 2023. Nevertheless, both sides declared their intention to voluntarily continue to observe the central quantitative limits under the Strategic Offensive Arms Treaty until the end of its life cycle. Thus, for nearly 15 years, this agreement has continued to play a significant positive role in maintaining the balance of forces and predictability in the sphere of strategic offensive weapons. The START Treaty expires on February 5, 2026, which means the imminent disappearance of the last international agreement providing direct limits on nuclear missile capabilities. A complete rejection of this treaty's legacy would, from many points of view, be a mistaken and short-sighted step, which, in our opinion, would also negatively affect the objectives of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In order not to provoke a further race in strategic arms and to ensure an acceptable level of predictability and restraint, we consider it reasonable to attempt to preserve, during the current rather turbulent period, the status quo established thanks to the START Treaty. Therefore, Russia is prepared, after February 5, 2026, to continue for 1 year to adhere to the central quantitative limits under the START Treaty. Subsequently, based on an analysis of the situation, we will make a decision regarding the further preservation of these voluntary self-restrictions. We believe this measure will only be viable if the United States acts in the same way and does not take steps that undermine or disrupt the existing balance of deterrence capabilities. In this regard, I ask the relevant agencies to continue to closely monitor U.S. activities in this sphere, above all with respect to its strategic offensive arsenal. Special attention should also be given to U.S. plans to expand the strategic components of its missile defense system, including preparations to deploy interceptors in space. We will proceed from the premise that the practical implementation of such destabilizing actions could nullify our efforts to maintain the status quo in the sphere of strategic offensive arms. We will respond accordingly. I believe that the implementation of the Russian initiative could make a significant contribution to creating an atmosphere conducive to a substantive strategic dialogue with the United States of America. Naturally, this would depend on conditions for its full-scale resumption being created and would take into account the whole range of efforts aimed at normalizing bilateral relations and eliminating fundamental contradictions in the field of security. Let us now move on to the current agenda. I give the floor to Sergei Lavrov and Andrei Romanovich Belousov.